Welcome to Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican about interesting people, places, and issues of northern New Mexico. This is Inez Russell Gomez, and this week we are talking to Dr. Wendy Johnson. And it's going to be a fascinating conversation because of her history as a doctor in our area, and also because she is now going to be a published author. Her book, Kinship Medicine, and let me get the complete title. It's awesome. Kinship Medicine, Cultivating Interdependence to Heal the Earth and Ourselves, is coming out July 15th. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thanks so much. It's awesome to be here, Inez. I'm really happy to share this time with you.
Thank you. And I think when we start off, give us a little bit about your history, because you have been a doctor for people in our area for quite some time. And before that, you have public health and other medical experience in the Midwest. You've done a lot of stuff. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I did my medical school in Ohio, and during a year of my medical school, I went into Chile in South America into a hospital, a medical school there, and did a year there with medical students, and I learned Spanish there. So when I was applying for residency, I wanted to go to a place where I could really learn full service family medicine and also have a big Spanish speaking population. So I matched into first the Albuquerque program at UNM for family medicine, and then I was the first resident to come up here to Santa Fe at La Familia with Dr. Herzain Chavez, who's still practicing in the area as well. And we started that residency program that's still going strong now. And that was in 1995. And so yeah, a while ago. I did leave the state for a while, went back to Ohio for a while, went and worked in Africa for a while, lived in Seattle and was at the University of Washington. And then I came back in 2012 and I was recruited back by Dr. Mario Pacheco to be medical director at La Familia. And I did that for about 10 years. And then now I'm working at El Centro. And so I have been,
Las
total.
Vegas? Do you work out of Las
I
Vegas,
have
El Rito,
worked.
or where?
My base is really Espanola, but I've been trying to plug some gaps for them, and there's just a lot of gaps. The El Centro mission is quite extensive. They have clinics in all kinds of tiny towns in northern New Mexico. The hub clinics are Espanola, Taos, and Las Vegas. So right now I'm mostly working in Espanola and Taos, but you're right. We had some issues with needing some more staff in Las Vegas. So I was working in Las Vegas for about a year, going out there a couple times a month. And now I'm doing the same thing with Taos. Hopefully we'll recruit some new people, but it's really hard to recruit docs, especially to northern New Mexico.
Yeah. I remember when we were at the Taos News, I met a doctor who was there for her family residency to pay off the loans kind of thing. It was one of those programs, and she ended up staying, and it was huge, but that's, 20 plus years ago. So it might be almost time for them to retire.
Yeah,
There's just such a shortage.
we have the highest percentage of doctors over 50 or 60, I think, in the country, especially primary care doctors. And we don't have a lot of new people coming into primary care because it's the lowest paid specialty and people are graduating now with such high medical debt. We have a real severe doctor shortage in New Mexico, and I'm especially concerned with these looming Medicaid cuts. If that happens, there's was an article recently about the rural hospitals, especially Holy Cross, Alta Vista, even Espanola Hospital, which is part of the PRES system. So hopefully it'll be safer. But those tiny rural hospitals can't, 40, 50% of their revenue comes from Medicaid. And if that's significantly cut, those three hospitals are all in the top 10% in the country for their high percentage of Medicaid patients. So they're really at risk for closing within 3 years if these Medicaid cuts go through, and it would just be devastating for northern New Mexico if that happened.
Yeah, it's so different from when I was a girl in Las Vegas, because we had two hospitals, because we had Las Vegas
Right.
Hospital and then we had St. Anthony's. And it just seemed like you picked where you went. And you could afford, if you got sick and you didn't have insurance, you paid out your bill over the year and you didn't go broke doing it. It was just a completely different system of care. And now we're bigger and richer and everything, and we have much fewer choices, or many fewer choices.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. I think things have gotten a lot more complicated. Certainly the costs of everything has gone up, especially pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
I think there hasn't been any regulation on the cost of pharmaceuticals. And so the pharmaceutical companies have just taken advantage of that. And especially with new medications, it's almost impossible to get them approved by insurances. And when you do, they cost thousands and thousands of dollars. So it's a bad situation.
So all of that, your dealings with the public, you're dealing with your patients, and your life in northern New Mexico kind of gets you to where you decided to write a book, doesn't it? Is that what
Yeah,
led you to?
totally. New Mexico, as we know here, is a really special place, but I think, around the country, it's a secret, and maybe we want it to stay a secret, but I think there's a lot of lessons that other places around the country can learn about life in New Mexico. And the one thing that made me come back after I left the state for a while, I think everybody has this kind of umbilical cord that ties them to New Mexico once you've lived here for a while. And especially if you grew up here, people leave, but a lot of people end up coming back. And for me, what I feel is really special about New Mexico is the way that the culture and the history of this place, you really feel it in everyday life. I think, of course, the entire United States has been colonized, but because of our unique history, I think because of things like the Pueblo Revolt, um, we still have the almost not all the Native American communities, but a lot of the Native American communities are in their ancestral lands. They weren't moved off. They weren't totally destroyed. A lot of oppression, of course. And then the Spanish settlers as well. Unlike a lot of the country, when the European colonizers came in, they kept really separate from those indigenous populations. But here, there was a lot of intermarriage. And so the cultures kind of blended in this way that was not like one culture completely wiping the other one off the board. So we still have all those traditions that are very much a part of almost like daily life in New Mexico. And we still have that sense of community and connection that those traditions brought us, both the indigenous tradition and the Hispanic traditions. I think we're really deep, rich communities where interconnection, kinship, family is really important. The other thing that's really important, I think, in both those community traditions is connection with the natural world. And I just heard today that I was down yesterday at the protest on the public lands, and it looks like I'm going to give us credit for turning that around, because it looks like that part of that has been taken out of the bill now. So we're not going to sell off all our public lands, at least not today. Um, Right. Okay. So I just read a bulletin, but hopefully we'll get it taken out entirely. So, but I think that we had such a great big turnout because we do tend to live close to nature in New Mexico, and I am a Parciante on an acequia. Hopefully, I don't have to explain that for a New Mexico audience, but for other folks listening, it's a system of irrigation ditches that was created based on some traditions by Native Americans and also traditions by Moorish people in Spain to irrigate the land. And it's, dates back to the 1700s. And still today we maintain those traditions. So it's another thing that builds strong community, that makes us really close to the outdoors and the natural world. And so I feel like all of that contributes to our well-being in New Mexico. And I know we have a lot of challenges with poverty and inequality and addiction and health challenges, but I think sometimes we look at just the challenges and not the things that that convey resilience. And I think
Yes.
all of those things really contribute to our resilience as people. And I just think a lot of the certainly the United States, but even the world has lost touch with the importance of connection and community.
Yep.
And as a
On that.
doctor, what I
Mhm.
see the healthcare system, especially, really ignoring that whole part of what is important for our health. And we know from studies that only about 20% of your health is really determined by biology and genetics and that the individual factors. And 80% of your health is determined by your environment, your social connections, your socioeconomic status, your education, those things that we call the social determinants of health. But in the healthcare system, we tend to ignore those. So this book is really about what would it be like if we, as a healthcare system, as in human beings, instead of pursuing all this individual wellness, what supplements am I going to take, what exercise program, instead of looking and thinking about our health as individuals, if we thought about it more collectively, and if we thought about our health and the way it's connected to the health of the environment and the earth, because I think it's all the same thing.
Right.
And
So
if
you're
we could
putting it all in
really work on,
context.
yeah, and if we could work on it all in context, how that would really help alleviate a lot of the problems that we have as a society, and in our environment.
Oh, okay. On that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
We make renewable doable. We're positive energy solar for a cleaner, brighter future for all. Positive energy's the right call. Feel good about your energy bill. Help save the planet too. Your trusted solar company, working hard for you. Generate positive energy. Positive energy solar.
We are back with Conversations Different, talking to Dr. Wendy Johnson about how the health of the earth, the health of humanity, and the health of our communities are all tied together. I really liked when you began your book, how you set it in the context of what was happening as you wrote or as you decided to write. And the state was raging. We had fires going everywhere. And that totally devastated the health of our forests and our waterways in northern New Mexico. And it's left a real burden on the people who live here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. At that, I wasn't, I was working in Santa Fe at the time of the fires, but certainly even in Santa Fe, as you know, a lot of people in Las Vegas or a lot of people in Santa Fe, people I worked with are from Las Vegas. They had relatives in Las Vegas. They have land in Las Vegas. Their ancestral land is there. And certainly those of us in Santa Fe were affected by the air quality and just, seeing that smoke every day, and thinking
It
about
has a lot to do with feeling good about life because you just felt miserable that whole,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, and we've been in a state of impending doom maybe since the start of COVID, I don't know, and it's like one thing after the other, but certainly that fire was really proximal, and actually, interestingly, that fire and COVID, there was just a study from California that showed the overlap of COVID and the fires in California. And I'm sure if we did the study of Las Vegas, it'd be the same thing. When you're breathing in all that smoke, it weakens your immune system. You're more likely to get COVID. You're more likely to get sicker from COVID. You're more likely to die of COVID even in a month after the fires, in that month-long period, because of the exposures. So it all kind of, snowballs. And during that time, there was a huge, again, that sense of community in New Mexico, a huge outpouring of support for folks who were affected by the fires. A lot of people were offering keeping horses, keeping cattle, keeping dogs and cats. I know a coworker I had let her aunt and uncle sleep in her bedroom while she slept on the couch for like 3 months, while their house was getting, while they were evacuated. Um, and now, still today, the health effects linger on, even in that area. A lot of behavioral health effects that we don't really talk about, even if you yourself have your house. A lot of people had their house, but everything around their house was blackened and turned to ash. And just the grief of having lost, even if you didn't lose your house, your neighbors lost their house, maybe you lost pets, just holding the grief of all that and just the grief of losing this place. I mean, I live here in Chupadero. We had a fire that came sort of close to us a few years ago, 2020. And I just think about, if this place burned, even if my house was standing, if everything around it burned, I feel like, again, this idea of kinship medicine, I really feel kinship to the animals and the trees and the land here. And it would be like a family member died. And that's, I think, we don't appreciate that as much,
No, and
when
I think
the
people who
lingering
don't,
grief.
that's totally true. And if you don't live in a place where you have roots, even if it's an emotional rootedness because you were drawn here, like so many of the people who move here, but the people who live here and have been here for hundreds of years, I remember watching the flames and thinking, when it was at Montezuma Castle, they thought it was going to go into town. And I wasn't thinking about the towns or the people, which was the most important thing. I started crying because I thought they were going to burn my grandmother's grave and it was going to get all of the cemetery, which is by the hospital. And for some reason, that just bothered me so much. And I think about, the sense of place that we have in New Mexico is very precious. And I think when
Right.
we look to the positive parts of it, it helps us be strong and as you always say, resilient.
Right. Yeah, and I think as human beings, it's very recent in our evolution that we are uprooted from that sense of place.
Yeah.
If you think about, your family is from Las Vegas, is that right, Inez?
Yeah, Las Vegas and Mora County, mostly. Yeah,
Mora?
yeah,
Yeah, so the places that were really hit hard. So you don't have to go back that much farther than probably your mother or even or grandmother at most to find, folks that lived in the same area as their great 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 grandparents. And in only the last 300 years or so have we even had the ability to move around the world very quickly. Before that, it took, you know, generations really to make a big move. So most people grew up where their great 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 grandparents grew up, or very close to that place,
yep,
maybe 100 miles away, not very far at most. So we have this strong rootedness to place. And then one point about this I make in the book, the idea that we're even individuals is erroneous. We are ecosystems. We
yep,
have a microbiome. And for most of us, up till about 300 years ago, that microbiome evolved with this place where our grandparents evolved. And then we kind of put everything in a blender. We put our genes in a blender. We put our microbiome in a blender. We started moving all around the earth. We started doing a lot of things that affected our microbiome. And, that all is very new evolutionarily for us.
right.
So our bodies aren't really adapting.
No, I think that's true. And I think there's a different way in how people in New Mexico who grew up here interact with each other that's hard sometimes for others to get used to. Is there was much more, when I was a little girl, a sense of what the community thought. And it wasn't in a bad way, but it was definitely that you did things within the guidelines and you helped each other. And the rugged individualist was not necessarily present here. People were very independent, but they operated within kind of a group. And I think that was very supportive of health and of well
Yeah.
being. And we don't have that today in the same way.
Yeah. I think, when you think about, I call it our communal muscle. And I think it's gotten weak. The word we use in medicine is atrophied to mean, it's just disintegrated kind of. And we, like any muscle, when it gets weak and deconditioned, you got to work that muscle to make it stronger again. And there's good studies that show when we're isolated from each other, we tend to distrust each other more. So if somebody comes to my door here in Chupadero, I know it's a neighbor. I keep my I shouldn't probably say this, but I keep my door unlocked most of the time. And I know that if somebody comes to my door, I don't get worried and think, oh, who's coming to my door? I think it's probably a neighbor. They probably want something. Somebody's dog's probably loose. Something happened. And it's my first thought is somebody needs something, and how can I help them? A lot of the country, if somebody rings your doorbell, it's immediately a feeling of fear or distrust because we've
How are they
become
going to
so
hurt me?
isolated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so why is somebody ringing my door? What's going on? Oh, I better, not open it and look and see, and I got my Ring camera on. Maybe I can look and see on the Ring camera, who's there before I actually open it. So there's immediately this feeling of apprehension and fear. And I think that is at the root of a lot of our problems, is that we need to really open ourselves up to trust and to connection. And when we connect with people in person, not on social media, we find out, even if we have political differences and other differences, if we focus on the commonalities. When you're with somebody in person, you tend to focus on what you have in common and make common cause. And that makes all the difference.
Oh, I love that. And we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision-targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santaFeNewMexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
We're back with Conversations Different, talking to Dr. Wendy Johnson about her new book, Kinship Medicine. Obviously, as a doctor, you have a busy career. How did you find time to write and to come up with kind of the whole premise about healing ourselves and the earth as we work together, to make a better life?
Well, some people ask me how long it took me to write this book, and I don't know how to answer that question. Kind of, it took me my whole life. I think,
Yeah.
and it's just, I had a serendipitous thing that happened to me as an undergrad. I got like a C- in my first chemistry class. So I was a pre-med, and then I changed to being an English and political science major. After that, I thought, oh, I can't be a doctor because science is too hard. So I'll change. Yeah. So I got an English degree. I've always been involved in politics. I've always been a little bit of a writer, mostly, as you know, writing op-eds and that kind of thing, and academic writing. But I started thinking about it more just because I didn't really see this perspective being represented in literature, in medicine, in anything really. And I felt like it needed to be added to the conversation. And so I just took on kind of teaching myself how to write in a book length form. I got a lot of really good mentors and helpers, and I thank them in the book. And so the actual writing of the book probably took about maybe 8-9 years, something like that. And yeah, and so it was really like anything I think you take on that's new. It's really good to get a lot of helpers. Right, a good friend of mine says writing is a team sport. So I think that's really true, and I have a
Yeah.
good team, so I'm blessed that
And
way.
that's similar to medicine, because with medicine, you have a lot of people
Right,
helping make people well.
right.
Now, the book is published, I think, July 15th. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you have a lot going on to let people know about it. This isn't just like Wendy paid the publisher, here's my book and give it to your friends. This is like a big deal, I think.
Well, thank you. That's nice to say. Yeah, it's published. I have a great publisher, North Atlantic Books. I didn't have to pay them. It's not self-published. They're a
I
really good
know.
publisher. They're nonprofit, and they have a great ethic where nobody at the organization makes more than 2.6 times the lowest paid employee.
Oh,
So they're a really great sort of social justice oriented publisher. And their distributor, though, is Penguin Random House. So, they
big
also
guys.
do a good job. Yeah,
Yep.
it's nice. And so I went and said, I want to do a big book tour, and people are really responding to that. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm going for it. And so we're going to have a big launch at Tumbleroot on the launch day, which is July 15th. And that's going to start. You can come early at 5:30, get dinner. I think Tender Fire will be here there, and Tumbleroot has food as well. Get settled. We'll start the program around 6 or 6:15, and it will be live streamed as well. And you could
Nice.
go to wendyjohnsonmd.com, wendyjohnsonmd.com, and you can find all this information there. And then it's also a fundraiser for Tewa Women United and for Amigos Bravos. And
Okay.
so there is a ticket charge, but all that ticket proceeds goes to those organizations. And also I'll donate a dollar from each book sold to those organizations as well. And then Albuquerque will be July 17th at Bookworks. I
Okay.
think that starts at 6. And then I'm going to swing around Ohio, if anyone knows people in Cleveland, Toledo, Columbus, Detroit. And again, that's all on my website. Going to Washington, D.C., to Boston, to Minneapolis, Portland, and Seattle.
Oh, that's a
And
big
maybe
one.
a couple other places. Yeah,
Good, good.
so
Yeah.
a lot of places. So we'll see how it goes. There's been a real lovely reception. I have a lot of great friends who are amazing people around the country, and a lot of them are conversation partners with me at a lot of these, and you can see all of it on the website and find out about the tour as well and updated dates.
In writing this book, and what conclusions did you come to about how we can start healing ourselves? What do we need to do in this big business of medicine and isolated world to be better?
Well, I think I was touching on it. It's interesting that you said in writing this book, because I think that's one of the things about writing that you don't realize until you get deep into it is writing itself is discovery. So it's not like I had all these fully formed ideas and I just put them down. As you write, you are also interrogating your own theses and really learning more about getting deeper into these questions. In researching, certainly I tried to back up everything I say with there's a lot of footnotes in here so you can see where I got everything from. But the first half of the book is sort of making the case for this thesis that that health is a collective, that we are ecosystems, that we cannot be healthy when our communities and ecosystems are not healthy. And then the last third or half of the book is exactly about that, is like, well, what can we do then? And I think the first shift that we have to make is really stop thinking in such an individualistic way and start thinking about our health as connected to everything else and our well-being connected to everything else. When you're in a family, when you have kids, certainly, you think about the whole family well-being. You don't do things in the family that's going to, burn down the house that the grandmother lives in, right? You're not going to do things that are going to take all the resources away from your kids, right? Maybe some people do, but reasonable folks don't do that. They fight for what they love. And so if we can really fall in love with our communities, fall in love with the natural world, and really think about how our actions impact other people, First of all, just thinking about our whole self and our whole community as really not a self, but a community and a family, and that kind of idea of kinship. I think there's so many ways our culture makes us really think that we're individuals, wants to split us off from the herd. And if we get split off from the herd, we're more vulnerable and we're easier to pick off. So resist that and try to retrain our minds. And then I think practicing that, building that communal muscle up, by taking action, by starting to look at what can I, it's not about starting something ourselves. A lot of amazing work is already going on. And how can I join with that? How can I support mutual aid that's already happening in my community? How can I support conservation efforts or rewilding efforts that are already happening in my community? How can I rethink about the way my household is set up so I'm not having such a big impact? How can I buy less stuff that I don't need, or just as simple as all that, it's a cascade. Once we go from an individual frame to a communal frame, and also from a anthropocentric, so people, human-centered way of thinking at the world, to more of a life-centric frame. I think once we start training our minds to work in those different ways, we see all kinds of different opportunities to build more resilient systems and more stronger communities and ecosystems.
Okay. And that is a great conclusion. We will put the dates for your book launches in our show notes so everyone will know how to go and see it. And I know you're going to be interviewed at Tumbleroot, and it's going to be a fascinating conversation there. And I look forward to seeing it. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Inez. It was great to be here.
Yes, it's been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to Conversations Different, hosted by me, Inez Russell Gomez, editorial page editor for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our weekly episodes would not be possible without your support. We hope you enjoy them and keep listening. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Consider signing up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our podcast is available by visiting our website, santafenewmexican.com/podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez is produced by Matt Dalside and Ernesto Cisneros, published by the Santa Fe New Mexican, a local and independent newspaper owned by Robin Martin.